Hello everyone, my name is Angela and I am an account manager here at LandCentral. Today I would like to talk about flood zones. What is a flood zone and can you build in a flood zone? So flood zones are geographic areas that FEMA or the Federal Emergency Management Agency has defined according to varying levels of flood risk. These zones are depicted on a community's flood insurance rate map, or FIRM, or a flood hazard boundary map. Each zone reflects the severity of the type of flooding in the area. How do you know if a property is in a flood zone? Well, you can call the county assessor and ask them, or you can go to the FEMA website and they have an area where you can put in an address to see if your property is in a flood zone. Now, most of our vacant lands don't have addresses assigned to them, so what I like to do is find the property using latitude and longitude on Google Maps, and then I find a nearby house or dwelling, and I click on it, and then it'll bring up an address, and you can use that address, and then go back to your map and kind of see where it's at. And that is free. You can go to that, and I'll put that link below if you want to play around with that, see if your house is in a flood zone or your property. You'll probably want to know if you can build in a flood zone. So building in a flood zone can be accomplished. 41 million Americans live in flood zones. Here's some information you'll want to know about building in flood zones. Insurance. So you'll need flood insurance. And the average flood insurance policy costs about $700 a year. The price will vary depending on what you're hoping to cover. So with flood insurance, you can choose to cover just the building or the contents of the building or both. U.S. law demands all banks and lenders require flood insurance if the property they're lending to is in a flood zone. You can get the flood How to get that insurance fee waived. So if you can prove your property is above the 100-year base flood elevation, or BFE, then the bank or lender may waive the required flood insurance. To do this, you're going to need a document from FEMA. To opt out of flood insurance, you're going to have to move your property from the flood zone before you build. So just a note, all new construction requires both the land and the home to be raised above the 100-year BFE. So the 100-year BFE refers to the elevation associated with a 1% chance of a flood occurring, meaning a flood hasn't occurred in that area or elevation in the last 100 years. The 500-year flood zone means that the area has a lower risk of flooding. So there are 4 flood zones. So FEMA conducts flood hazard analysis throughout the United States, mapping the results for flood insurance purposes. According to FEMA, there are 4 flood zones. There's V as in Victor zone. It's high risk for flood. So these are the most hazardous zones. Typically first row, beachfront property, mandatory flood insurance. Then you have your A zone. High risk for flood. Properties in this zone have a potential for flooding as they are typically near water, such as a lake, river, stream, or wetland. Mandatory flood insurance. X zone. Minimal risk for flood. Insurance not mandatory. And a D, as in dog, zone. Risk unknown. These areas have not been studied for flood risk, so it's a gamble. Since flooding is possible, flooding insurance is highly recommended but not mandatory. So building in a flood zone. So you found your dream property and it just happens to be in a flood zone. You're determined to build, right? But you want to do things right. Well, the first things you'll need is a deed or title. You're going to need the BFE data, a special permit or variance, flood insurance, an architect and a builder, and a FEMA elevation certificate. There are 3 things that you want to discuss with your builder before building in a flood zone. So one is structural elevation. This is your best bet. Building on stilts or pilings will safeguard your home from rushing flood water. You may even have the building permit to have the rushing water flow beneath the structure, keeping you and your belongings safe from the storm. Fill. With a permit, you may be able to raise the area above the BFE with additional soil. To do this, apply for a letter of map revision based on fill from FEMA. Once approved, they'll revise the community flood map and show your home is no longer in the high-risk flood zone. Or you can flood proof. Work with your builder to build up the home's foundation to slope downward about 1 inch per foot. As you can see, building in a flood zone isn't impossible. With the proper precautions and the right team, you can build your dream home throughout the U.S. So go forth and find that perfect property for all your building needs. So we really hope that you enjoyed this video and you learned a little bit of information. If you do like it, please share or subscribe. You can go to our website at www.landcentral.com to look at any properties, and you can also check out our blog for all sorts of wonderful information. We hope you'd enjoy this video. Have a wonderful day.